Okay, this week we're going to talk about part 2 of the book, which are issues and solutions. We're going to start with chapter 5. This is on climate. And as we've discussed previously, we've spoken about sustainability, and we've spoken about a little bit about the comprehensive plan, and some of the other areas that really fall into the line of planning overall, or at least should. And so now this week we're going to talk a little bit about climate, which has an impact on many different areas of not only sustainability but overall planning as a whole. So Chapter 5 introduces us into climate change and global warming. Now in this chapter we're going to discuss the differences in climate and weather. We're going to learn about the IPCC. We're going to learn some of the causes of temperature increases on Earth. And Chapter 5 also discusses climate change over time, along with greenhouse gases and human impact that increases overall temperature. And we're going to briefly discuss looking into how we reduce our climate impact. Now, I'd be remiss to say that if I didn't say that this, of course, is an area that can be contentious. This is what I was discussing during the syllabus quiz, or during the syllabus discussion, rather. This overall, climate change can be political. Greenhouse gas emissions, the impact that humans have on the planet. I know they can generally be used as political talking points. No matter what you believe, it doesn't matter which you believe. The science that shows that the temperatures are increasing, whether you believe that's a natural occurrence of the globe, that we of the overall Earth, that it's kind of cyclical and over hundreds of years it changes. No matter what, we still have to deal with it. As planners, you still have to deal with the overall situation that will happen in a certain period of time, that is happening now, and make sure that we can prepare for it, whether it's through policy, whether it's through other means. So we're going to talk about these things. So even if you disagree that that climate change is actually occurring, again, it doesn't so much matter. The science says that the temperatures are rising. It doesn't matter how they're rising. We still have to deal with those type of things. So just keep that in mind as we go along. Now, most often we use the terms climate and weather interchangeably, but they're not the same. Now they're related, but they're of course different. Now, weather is the short-term variation in temperature, precipitation, and wind that occurs from day to day. Climate, though, is the long-term trend of atmospheric conditions measured over decades, over centuries, or even longer. For people to understand where the climate change, or a few people understand where the climate change starts, and the push for overall push for global action. Now, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, or the IPCC, is comprised of many top leading scientists throughout the globe. The panel was started by the United Nations Environmental Program, the UNEP, and the World Meteorological Organization, or the WMO. The panel it consists of top scientists all over the world who do not really conduct original research, but instead what they do is they look at the work from peers, and they review overall existing research. Now, in 2007, over 450 lead authors, contributing authors, and 2,500 scientific expert reviewers from over 130 plus countries produced the IPCC report. The panel received 2007 Nobel Peace Prize for their efforts. Now, one thing that you'll find when it comes to the study of sustainability, global warming, greenhouse gases, and the UN's initiatives is that it can be, of course, a heavily disputed topic, which I just previously discussed. Now, One thing, though, is true. No matter what your belief, the Earth's temperature is increasing. The pattern of warming and cooling is really nothing new. However, the new increase in temperature is happening at a more rapid pace than previous times in Earth's history. Now, for that reason, scientists are more determined to find the cause and solutions to this dire problem. And of course, as planners, we have to do the same thing. We have to make sure that we protect, the life, safety, welfare of our communities in which we're working. Now, causes of global warming are also argued in many forums, as we all know, we all hear. We're going to stick with just some of the basic causes of the Earth's temperature increases. Now, the book discusses a few of these in very scientific terms, but again, don't get too hung up on that. Instead, understand the compounds and elements that cause this temperature to overall increase. Now, the primary driver for the increase is called the greenhouse effect, and as it states, this is similar to a greenhouse that prevents heat and moisture from escaping within an environment. It's all about the ultraviolet radiations, the reflectivity, and the light waves. Now, when UV rays hit the Earth, some solar radiation is on visible spectrum. The infrared rays we can't see. Both hit the surface of the Earth and are absorbed and redirected back into space. Now, for light surfaces, the more reflectivity occurs. For dark surfaces, the more energy is absorbed. In either case, though, the elements in the atmosphere can prevent much of the energy from leaving the overall globe. Now, these are greenhouse gases. Now, this diagram will give you a good idea of the different greenhouse gases that remain in the atmosphere. The majority of the gases are carbon dioxide. The typical carbon dioxide molecule can remain in the atmosphere for approximately 5 years. This concentration can be attributed to the Industrial Revolution, when factories became part of the skyline of many of the cities. The production of combustion engine, of course, continues to cause increased carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. The decrease in forest through deforestation and urban development, and of course urban sprawl, removes the tools that can help break down and remove carbon dioxide in the air. Of course, there's always been the challenge of the U.S. We have a lot of deforestation in the United States, and as the U.S. grew, and from the birth of the United States, as we kind of moved out west, trees started going down, and of course we had a lot of deforestation happening. And of course now we have third world and second world countries who are clear cutting, and we're trying to tell them what to do, and so there gets to be some contention there between countries about the fact that we've already done it, and now they want to do it and become more of a first world nation, and so you get some issues there. Now, scientists have two areas of study when looking at climate change. The first is detection study. This type of study is used to determine whether or not unusual changes in climate have happened. But they don't say anything about the causes. The second is the attribution study. Now, this type of study looks at the causes. Now, scientists want to know whether the changes are anthropogenic or human caused. They must then determine what activity caused the change so that a plan can be developed to mitigate or reduce any of the negative impacts from it. Now, human factors, of course, are numerous. They include increased population, which continues to occur, economic growth, and, of course, fossil fuel use. Now, scientists use many ways to examine the change in the levels of greenhouse gases over the course of longer period of time. The ones listed are just a few and include satellite interpretation, tree ring analysis, and testing the carbon within ice cores that they pull from various parts of the globe. Now the book goes into more details about each of these processes. Now you're not going to be asked detailed questions about each of these, but just generally know about each one of them. Now scientists must also project what is going to happen in the future, and for that they use computer models, and basically are a start to helping them understand that. They help them to study weather and patterns, chemical levels in the air, and projections based on processes that are overall constant. They can also calculate the rate of glacial melting, sea level rise during seasons, and temperature adjustments. Marine life migration and pattern shifts can also be predicted based on previous patterns. Now, once again, it's important to understand that all of these systems, about all of these systems and their reactions to change, just understand that they're all connected to one another. Stabilizing the environment is, of course, a tall order, but one that truly needs to happen. Now, you've probably heard the terms climate neutral and carbon neutral. Climate neutral is popular with organizations that have a goal of doing business in a way that has an overall net climate impact of 0. Carbon neutral refers to the same conditions of no net greenhouse gas emissions. Now the two focuses are a start, but again, they're daunting. Robert Socolow and Stephen Pacala of Princeton University, they came up with the climate stabilization wedge. Their idea was that if you take steps in small bites, it will ultimately help us to someday become more stable. In the chart that you see on the slide, you see some of the areas that we should focus on. We should really focus our attention, such as renewable energy, of course, efficient buildings and vehicles, and of course carbon capture. Now BAU is in the chart stands for business as usual, and these include converting coals to liquids, tar sands, and oil shales. Steps for reducing greenhouse gases are the same no matter what type of organization you are. Now the steps really, and these steps, really important to keep in mind, these steps are generally speaking what planners take when developing an overall plan. A lot of these are part of strategic planning, so just keep that in mind as we go along. But steps are, of course, to make a plan. This is creating a roadmap with all the tasks. To do this, as we've learned in the previous lessons, you must define a goal. What is really the purpose of the overall plan? What it's trying to accomplish? What is it? What are we trying to accomplish with the plan? The important part of creating a goal is that it must be measurable. You have to have a measurable goal in order for it to make sense and for you to have something to achieve. Now the book gives a good example. Reduce net greenhouse gas emissions by 5% each year compared to 2010 emissions. So as you can tell, it's very specific, it's measurable, and you know whether you're actually on task to reach that goal. Also, you have to define the boundaries. Are you setting the goal for just a part of the organization, or part of the city or county, such as a special district? What is the scope or timeline overall? Finally, who's going to be involved, and what are going to be their responsibilities? Now, this information should always be in writing. If you just say it out loud, it's certainly not going to happen, and it's not going to be. No one's going to be really accountable for it. The second step is to measure. That is to prepare, your greenhouse gas inventory. This is conducting a greenhouse gas inventory, known as measuring your carbon footprint. This information gives you overall information about sources, and it gives a list of sources that will be the most significant. Determine whether you should use a protocol, which is used across an organization. This is defined by 3 scopes. Scope number 1 includes the direct emissions from sources owned by or controlled by the organization. Scope 2 includes indirect emissions from purchased electricity or purchased heat. And Scope 3 includes indirect emissions from other sources such as vehicles owned by others. Now, collecting data comes after the sources have been, of course, identified. Now, this is a time-consuming step, but of course it's a necessary step. Data must be vetted from numerous sources. You can't just choose one source and go with it, generally speaking. Calculating the data is really the next step under measurement, and it is very important to the greenhouse gas inventory in order to be credible. Data must be checked and, of course, rechecked. Afterwards, monitoring the process regularly is important to ensure the goals are being met. And then third, reduce emissions is our final third step. If the previous steps are successful, this part is very fulfilling because you can actually see that you've completed or reached your goal. In this step, you determine how you can meet the reduction goals you set during the planning phase. Once again, this step is similar to what you've read about and what we've discussed previously. Start out with projects that are low cost and provides the fastest benefit, those low-hanging fruits that you can do instantly, and then move from there. Energy efficiency projects fall in this category. Also, you can start a pilot project at a small scale and then increase it depending on its overall success rate. It is important to remember that not all projects are going to be successful, and most will need to be tweaked to achieve the best return. Now, the book goes over many different strategies for reducing emissions. These include energy use, or switching from coal and using solar or wind power; transportation, that's producing vehicles that no longer use fossil fuels or creating multimodal transportation networks; and buildings, which is creating more energy efficient buildings. Now, the book goes through some others, so just be familiar with them. And these strategies are areas that can be incorporated into overall local policies. Okay, so that is it for Chapter 5. Don't forget that that your article synopsis is due by Saturday at midnight, 11:59 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So if you haven't started, you need to go ahead and start that and make sure you have that done. Also, don't forget 2 weeks later after that, you have your final paper that is due as well. So don't forget that as well. And again, as always, if you have any questions regarding this chapter, regarding any of the assignments, please send me an email and let me know, and I'll be happy to help you out and do what I can to help you understand whatever it is that you need help with. So with that, I'll see you in the next chapter.